At the family will reading, my sister said, she's the reason Dad got sick. My cousin laughed, stress from her drama put him in the hospital. My aunt added, she's always been toxic. Hours later, my former therapist arrived unexpectedly with a signed letter from Dad. As he read it aloud, my sister started screaming. When I walked into the lawyer's office, I had no idea it would be the start of the most intense and painful day of my life. It was supposed to be straightforward, a legal matter, just reading Dad's will and figuring out what happens next. Instead, the room felt suffocating. It was as if all the years of tension between my family members were suddenly about to explode in my face. I sat there in silence, hands folded tightly in my lap, trying to steady my racing heart. My name's Ellie, and I'm not one for drama. I'm the kind of person who just quietly does my thing, gets through the day, and doesn't rock the boat. But my sister Audrey, well, she's different. She's always been the loud one, the one who could turn any situation into a spectacle. And as we sat around the polished wooden table, I could already feel the tension between us simmering just beneath the surface. There was Audrey, sitting across from me, her face a mask of cool indifference, though I could tell by the way her fingers drummed impatiently on the table that she was anything but calm. Next to her was Aunt Beatrice, the one person in the family who never seemed to show emotion. She had a way of keeping things under control, of acting like everything was just fine, even when things clearly weren't. Lyle, my cousin, was seated to my right, flipping through his phone like he couldn't care less about the will reading. Typical Lyle. He was always the jokester, always the one trying to make light of any situation. Then there was the lawyer, Mr. Merrick. He was a quiet man, older than I remembered, with gray hair and a pair of glasses that sat low on his nose. He was the kind of lawyer who spoke slowly and deliberately, making sure every word was understood. He had a reassuring presence, but today, that didn't make me feel better. In fact, it made everything feel worse. Because today wasn't just about Dad's will. It was about everything that had happened over the years, everything I'd tried to ignore. Dad had been sick for so long, and when he finally passed away a few weeks ago, it felt like a part of me had died with him. We had all watched him deteriorate, helpless, and I'd stayed by his side as much as I could. The rest of the family, however, had distanced themselves. Audrey, especially. I tried to tell myself it was because they couldn't handle watching him suffer. But deep down, I knew the real reason. Audrey had never forgiven me for things I hadn't done, things I couldn't control. The room was quiet as Mr. Merrick started reading from the will, his voice filling the silence. He read out the usual formalities, outlining the division of Dad's assets, his investments, his savings. But none of that really mattered. What mattered was the house. The house where Dad and I had lived together for the past 20 years, a place filled with memories, both good and bad. When Mr. Merrick got to the part where he announced the distribution of the estate, I barely heard him. I was too focused on Audrey, watching her reaction. She shifted in her seat, and I could feel her eyes on me, full of something that almost looked like anger. I couldn't tell if she was angry at the will or if she was angry at me, but I wasn't sure I wanted to know. And now, Mr. Merrick said, looking up from his papers, Richard Whittaker's estate shall be divided as follows. Ellie, you will inherit the house where you and your father lived. The rest of the estate, including the financial assets, will be divided equally between Audrey and Lyle. The words hung in the air for a moment before Audrey's voice broke through the silence. What? She snapped, standing up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is ridiculous. Dad was always more than fair with you. And now you get the house, just like that? I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to explain, to tell her that I didn't want to take the house, that it wasn't about the money or the property, it was about the memories, the last part of Dad I still had left. But Audrey wasn't listening. She was already on a roll, her voice growing louder and sharper. You're the reason Dad got sick, she spat. All the stress you caused him, your drama, your constant need for attention, it's what put him in the hospital. I felt the words hit me like a punch in the stomach. I had always known that Audrey blamed me for everything. For Dad's health problems. For the arguments. For the tension. But hearing her say it out loud, in front of everyone, was like a weight crashing down on me. I tried to steady my breath, but it felt like I was suffocating. Lyle, sitting next to me, let out a low laugh, though it wasn't a funny laugh at all. Yeah, stress from all her drama definitely put Dad on edge. I mean, it's no surprise, right? We all saw how you two were always at each other's throats. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just sat there, frozen, as Aunt Beatrice looked at me with what I could only describe as pity. You've always been toxic to this family, Ellie, Beatrice added quietly. Everyone's walked on eggshells around you for years. Maybe it's time you saw that. The words felt like knives in my chest. They didn't even seem to care that Dad was gone, that we were supposed to be mourning him, not tearing each other apart. Audrey, Lyle, Beatrice, they were all piling on, blaming me for everything, as if I was the cause of their pain. But then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the door to the office opened. I glanced up, confused, as a familiar face stepped into the room. It was Dr. Harris, my former therapist. I hadn't seen him in years, not since Dad was first diagnosed with his illness. He had helped me through some of the toughest times in my life, but I had never expected him to show up at a moment like this. I'm sorry to interrupt, Dr. Harris said, his voice calm but serious. But I have something for Ellie. It's from Richard. Everyone in the room fell silent, the tension palpable as Dr. Harris walked toward the table, holding a manila envelope. He handed it to Mr. Merrick, who looked up in confusion. This letter, Dr. Harris explained, was signed by Richard shortly before his passing. He wanted it to be read at the will reading. Mr. Merrick, still puzzled, opened the envelope. As he read aloud, I felt the world around me shrink until all I could hear was his voice. To my dear daughter, Ellie, if you are reading this, I am no longer with you. But I want you to know something important. Audrey and the rest of the family have blamed you for my illness, and I need to make something clear. My sickness wasn't caused by you. It wasn't caused by anyone but me. I spent too much time worrying about things I couldn't control, and I let that stress consume me. You were always there for me, Ellie, even when no one else was. I don't regret the life we had together, and I hope you know that I loved you, no matter what they say. Please don't let them make you feel like you're to blame. I've watched you struggle for years, and I'm proud of how strong you've become. Don't let their words haunt you. I trust you to take care of the house and everything that comes with it. This is my gift to you, a symbol of the love I have for you. With all my love, Dad. Mr. Merrick paused, looking up at the room full of stunned faces. And then, the silence was broken by Audrey's scream. No. This isn't fair, she cried, her voice high-pitched with rage. He can't do this. He never would have said that. Lyle was still, staring at the ground, his usual smirk wiped away. Beatrice remained frozen, her face pale. And me? I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to reach out to Audrey, to explain that this wasn't a victory for me. But I didn't. I was tired of explaining myself. As Audrey's screams echoed in the room, I could feel the energy shift, becoming heavier with every passing second. Her face was twisted in fury, her hands shaking at her sides. Lyle was silent now, his phone forgotten on the table in front of him. Aunt Beatrice, usually so composed, looked lost in thought, her eyes staring at the floor as though she were searching for something to hold on to. I sat still, my heart thumping painfully in my chest. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel, relief, anger, sadness, or guilt. My father's words had been a balm for me, a final piece of comfort after years of uncertainty and pain. But for the rest of my family, it was a betrayal. A truth they couldn't face. Audrey's voice broke through again, her words now more desperate than accusatory. He didn't mean it. He couldn't have meant it. Dad would never say something like that. She was pleading, her tone shifting to something raw and vulnerable. She was no longer the confident, cold Audrey I had grown up with. In that moment, she sounded like a little girl, desperate for validation. For reassurance. I could see the cracks in her armor, the ones she had worked so hard to build over the years. But instead of offering her sympathy or even understanding, my own anger started to surface. It wasn't just about the house, the estate, or the money. It was about everything that had happened between us. The years of her blaming me for things I couldn't control. The accusations. The hurtful words. The endless need for her to tear me down to build herself up. I had spent so many years trying to justify my place in this family, trying to make them see me as something other than a burden or a source of all their problems. But now, even in the face of my father's final words, they couldn't accept it. They couldn't accept that maybe, just maybe, they had been wrong all along. Lal finally spoke up, his voice low and unsteady. "This is messed up," he muttered. "I thought we were all gonna get something from this, not just Ellie. He was our dad, too." I turned toward him, meeting his gaze for the first time during the whole reading. There was no humor in his eyes now, no teasing or easygoing charm. Just confusion and hurt. But even though I understood that he wasn't as fully invested in the family drama as Audrey, his words stung. This wasn't about things, it was about the emotional toll Dad's death had taken on all of us. It was about the years we had lost, the years of bitterness and resentment we had built between us. And none of us had figured out how to fix it. Aunt Beatrice was the next to speak, her voice quiet but unwavering. "Richard was right," she said softly, almost as if speaking to herself. "I knew how much he suffered, trying to keep everything together. But we never helped him. We just let it happen." She paused, swallowing hard, before adding, "And we let him push us all away." Her words hung in the air, and I could see the weight of her guilt settle on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Aunt Beatrice had always been the stable one in our family, the one who kept everything running smoothly. Who never let emotions get in the way of logic. But now, with Dad gone, she seemed lost, like a ship adrift without a compass. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of empathy for her. But then, I remembered that it wasn't just Dad's illness that had fractured our family. It was everything that came before it. The lies, the secrets, the misunderstandings. And Audrey. Audrey had been the one who had fought me the hardest. Who had always tried to make me feel like I was the one at fault for every family issue. Who blamed me for everything she couldn't fix. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much it had hurt me over the years. How much I had sacrificed, how many times I had tried to be the one to hold everything together. But I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to do it, not in front of them. I didn't want to be the one who let the anger take over, even though it felt like a part of me had been chipped away by every word that had been thrown at me. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by Audrey's quiet sobs as she sat back down, her shoulders trembling. Lyle, not knowing what to say, simply looked at the floor, tapping his fingers restlessly on the table. Dr. Harris, who had been standing quietly in the corner, finally stepped forward. He cleared his throat, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. "Ellie," he said gently, his voice calm, "I know this is hard. But your father wanted you to know something, he didn't want this to tear you apart. He wanted you to have this house, not because you were the favorite or because of anything related to the past, but because he trusted you. He knew you could carry it forward." I looked at him, my throat tightening as the tears threatened to break free. I wanted to scream, to argue, to demand that they understand, but it felt like the words were trapped inside me, refusing to come out. Dad had always been the one to say that family was everything. But what did that mean when the very people who were supposed to love you turned their backs when things got tough? What did it mean when they blamed you for things that were never your fault? How could I move forward with a family that couldn't even acknowledge their own shortcomings? For the first time, I realized that it wasn't just about the house, or the will, or even the money. It was about the relationships, or the lack thereof. It was about years of emotional neglect, unspoken resentment, and unresolved issues that had festered for so long. The house was just a symbol. It was Dad's final attempt to make something right, even though we were too far gone to fully understand it. Aunt Beatrice sighed, her voice barely audible. We've all made mistakes, Ellie. I know I haven't been the best to you. But I want to change that. I want us to be a family again. We've lost so much already. I nodded slowly, not knowing what to say. I wasn't sure I could forgive her, or anyone else in that room, just yet. But for the first time, I saw a crack in the armor. Maybe, just maybe, it was a start. Audrey had stopped crying by now, though her face was still red and swollen. Her eyes locked with mine, and for a brief moment, I saw something in them that I hadn't seen in years. Regret. Maybe she didn't know how to apologize. Maybe she never would. But for the first time, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. And that was a shift I wasn't prepared for. As the minutes ticked by, the weight of everything seemed to settle into place. Dr. Harris handed the letter back to Mr. Merrick, and the lawyer placed it gently into the folder. There's nothing more to discuss here, I think, Mr. Merrick said, looking around at all of us. His tone was final, but there was a heaviness in his voice that suggested he, too, understood the gravity of the situation. The room emptied slowly. No one spoke as they gathered their things, each of us lost in our thoughts. I stayed behind for a moment, staring at the empty chair where my father used to sit. I didn't know if this family would ever heal, but for the first time in years, I felt a small glimmer of hope. Maybe it wasn't too late to fix what was broken. Maybe. The air in the room felt strangely empty once everyone left. The echoes of the conversation still seemed to linger in my ears, the weight of everything pressing down on my chest. I sat there, alone for the first time in hours, the envelope from Dad's lawyer resting in front of me on the table. I hadn't expected the letter to change everything. I hadn't expected it to pull the rug out from under me and show me, so clearly, how deep the cracks in my family's foundation really were. I hadn't expected Audrey to crumble, to lose her composure like that. For the first time in my life, I saw her as human, not the cold, calculating sister who always had something to prove. And then there was Beatrice, my aunt, who for once didn't have the answers, who wasn't the rock she had always been. I didn't know what to do with all of it. I felt like I was trapped between two worlds, the one that I had once known, where everything was perfect on the outside but toxic underneath, and the one that was just starting to form in front of me, a world where truth had shattered the illusions. But I wasn't ready to let them off the hook. Not yet. I didn't know how long I had been sitting there when the door clicked open, and I looked up to see Dr. Harris standing in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his professional therapist face anymore. There was a softness in his expression now, like he knew just how much of a burden today had been for me. Ellie, how are you holding up? He asked, his voice gentle. I didn't have to answer. He could see it all in my face. Is everything okay? He continued, his hands in his pockets. I can stay if you need to talk. I shook my head. I appreciated his concern, but I didn't need to talk anymore. At least, not in the way I had before. I had spent years speaking to therapists and counselors, always looking for the validation I never got from my family. I realized now that I didn't need them to validate me. I just needed to find the strength to stop looking for approval. Dr. Harris hesitated, his eyes glancing at the envelope in front of me, then back to me. I know it's a lot to process, but I've seen a change in you since the letter was read. This family, it's going to take time, Ellie. But I think the first step is letting go of the past. Don't let their words eat you up inside. I nodded slowly, appreciating the reminder. Letting go was hard. But I could do it now, with Dad's words in my heart. The anger that had fueled so much of my relationship with Audrey and the rest of the family was starting to dissipate. But there was still one thing left to do. One last thing to make sure that my voice wasn't drowned out, that they couldn't get away with their toxic behavior. I stood up, pushing the chair back with more force than I intended. Thanks, Dr. Harris, I said, my voice more resolute than I'd expected. But I need to do something now. He gave me a sympathetic look, his brow furrowing slightly as if he was trying to understand what I meant, but he didn't ask. Instead, he just nodded. I'll give you some space. If you need anything, I'm just a phone call away. After he left, I took a deep breath and straightened my posture, then picked up the phone. I dialed Audrey's number first, then waited. When she finally answered, I could hear the tension in her voice, the remnants of her earlier anger still there. "Ellie," she said coldly, "I don't know what you think that letter is supposed to mean." "It doesn't change anything." I wasn't surprised. "No, it doesn't," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But you and I both know what it really means. Dad finally said what we both knew was true. And it's time we both stopped pretending." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing heavily, like she was about to say something, but she stopped herself. "Listen," I continued, "I'm not going to keep fighting with you. But you need to know something: what you've done, what you've said, how you've treated me, it stops now. I'm not going to let you or anyone else tell me who I am anymore. Not after everything that's happened." There was another long pause. "What are you going to do, Ellie?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm taking the house. Not because I want to rub it in your face, but because Dad wanted me to have it. It's my place now. And I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to make sure it's something good, something that honors the memory of what we had, even if it was broken. And if you ever need a place to stay, you know where it is. But don't expect me to bail you out, or take the blame for everything anymore." I heard her sigh on the other end, her frustration and helplessness clear. But the conversation had shifted, in a way I hadn't expected. She didn't have the power to manipulate me anymore, to make me feel guilty for things that weren't my fault. She didn't control me the way she used to. I ended the call and took another deep breath. I felt like I had just taken a weight off my chest. But there was still more to do. I dialed Lyle next. "Hey," I said when he picked up. "I know you probably don't care about all the family drama, but I want to make something clear. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for the house, or the money, or any of it. But I'm not just going to let you all walk away from this like nothing happened." There was a pause on the other end before Lyle responded with a soft chuckle. "You're serious, huh?" "I'm serious," I replied firmly. "The way you all acted today, the way you've all treated me for years, that ends now. I'm not going to sit back and let you continue making me feel like I don't matter. I'm taking what's mine. And you can either accept it, or you can leave me alone." For a long moment, there was no response. Then Lyle sighed. "Fine. Whatever. You win, Ellie. But don't expect me to be all buddy-buddy with you." "I don't need that," I said, hanging up the phone. Finally, I turned to Beatrice's number. She picked up right away, and I could tell she had been expecting my call. "Ellie," she said softly. "I know things have been strained. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. I've been so focused on holding everything together, I forgot what really mattered. You matter." Her words took me by surprise. I wasn't sure if she meant them, but I wanted to believe she did. "I appreciate that, Aunt Beatrice. But this isn't about apologies anymore. It's about making things right. And I'm going to do that. I'm not asking for your approval. I'm just telling you how it's going to be." There was a pause. "I understand," she said quietly. "You're stronger than I realized, Ellie. I'm sorry for everything." It wasn't the reconciliation I had hoped for, but it was a start. I sat back in my chair, staring out the window. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my own life. No more pretending. No more blaming. No more being the scapegoat for things that were beyond my control. The rest of the family might never fully understand. They might never accept what Dad had said, or the way I was finally standing up for myself. But I had learned something today. I didn't need them to. I had my own life to live now. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. As the days went on, I turned the house into something I could be proud of. It was more than just a place to live, it became a sanctuary. A place where I could finally be myself, without anyone else's expectations hanging over me. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't the person they tried to paint me as. I was Ellie. And I was finally free.